There is a kind of beauty that feels almost unreal, the kind that makes people forget the person behind it. For years, the world looked at Liu Yifei and saw a legend, a figure so ethereal that reality seemed unable to reach her. Under the soft glow of stage lights, she appears untouched by time or imperfection. To the public, she is still the fairy sister, the woman who stepped out of a painting and walked into Cbiz as if destiny had chosen her. But what happens when a myth becomes a prison? What happens when the world is so obsessed with your perfection that it refuses to let you be anything else? She stands before thousands, poised and serene, a symbol of purity that the industry has polished for more than a decade. Cameras flash, fans cheer, the spotlight follows her like a shadow. Yet behind her calm expression lies a quiet truth. The higher the pedestal, the smaller the space to breathe. Liu Yifei's greatest blessing became her deepest constraint. The beauty that elevated her also trapped her, shaping a narrative she never fully controlled. Most stars battle scandals, rumors, or rivalry. Liu Yifei faced something more subtle, something more suffocating. She faced an image that refused to evolve. Every step she took, every role she played, every appearance she made was filtered through the expectation that she must remain celestial, untouched, eternal. But no real woman can survive forever inside a fantasy written by others. And beneath that flawless surface is a story few have ever dared to explore. The story of how a girl with quiet dreams became an icon too perfect to change. And how, in the silence behind her smile, she began to question whether the world admired her, or the illusion built around her. Long before the title fairy sister followed her everywhere, Liu Yifei lived a life far removed from the mythology the public would later place upon her. She spent her childhood between two worlds, moving from Wuhan to the United States, carrying with her a quiet resilience shaped by change and distance. When she returned to China as a young teenager, she was not yet the ethereal figure the public now remembers. She was simply a girl with delicate features, a disciplined mind, and a calmness that made people look twice without quite knowing why. Her entry into the entertainment industry was almost abrupt. She was barely 15 when she stepped into her first major role, and the impact was immediate. Something about her presence felt different. She did not try to captivate. She simply existed, and people were captivated. Casting directors saw it. Viewers felt it. The media amplified it. They called her otherworldly. They said she was born for costume dramas. They said she had the kind of beauty that did not seem to belong to the modern world. And with every compliment, the pedestal beneath her grew taller. The turning point came when she starred in a series of historical dramas that imprinted her image permanently into the public imagination. Flowing robes, serene expressions, an untouched elegance that made her appear less like an actress and more like a living portrait. The audience embraced her, but the industry did something far more consequential. It defined her. The fairy sister title was meant to celebrate her, but it became a label. She would spend years trying to live beyond. As she moved into film, the pattern followed her. Directors sought her not for her versatility, but for her aura. She became the embodiment of purity, softness, stillness. Scripts offered to her repeated the same archetype. The untouchable beauty, the tragic heroine, the timeless figure marked by destiny. She delivered these roles with grace, but each one pulled her further from the range she longed to explore. Her early successes carried an illusion that the path ahead would be effortless. But talent grows through challenge, and challenge rarely arrives when the industry believes it has already found the perfect version of you. For Liu Yifei, every opportunity came wrapped in caution. Producers wanted her image, not her instincts. Investors wanted her beauty, not her risk-taking. Even the public, enamored with her elegance, struggled to accept her in roles that asked for grit or imperfection. And yet, beneath the layers of praise and projection, she was quietly searching for herself. She trained diligently, pushed her boundaries, studied acting with a seriousness that few outside the industry recognized. She wanted to prove she was more than a face framed by legend. more than a symbol, more than a story others insisted on telling for her. But the higher her image ascended, the heavier its weight became. The girl who once moved between countries with determination now found herself unable to move within her own career. She was admired, adored, and celebrated, yet she could not escape the one thing that kept following her: perfection, a gift she never asked for, and a demand she could no longer satisfy. And so, behind her calm gaze and impeccable grace, a quiet conflict began to take shape, a conflict that would soon push her into the most defining phase of her journey. The shift in Liu Yifei's career did not happen with a scandal. It happened with silence. A long, heavy silence that settled over her filmography as one project after another failed to meet expectations. Big productions with grand budgets and promising concepts collapsed under poor reviews and weak box office results. And suddenly, the narrative around her changed. The same industry that once praised her ethereal presence began to question her capability. The same viewers who admired her elegance began to wonder if she had anything beyond it. The fairy sister, once untouchable, was now being quietly doubted. It was not a single failure that triggered the turning point. It was a pattern that revealed the cage she had been placed in long before she realized it. Casting directors stopped offering her complex roles. Producers whispered that she was beautiful but lacked emotional range. Critics described her performances as distant, forgetting that distance was the very quality the industry had encouraged for years. Every comment, every headline, every disappointed expectation chipped away at her confidence, not because she did not believe in her abilities, but because she was beginning to see how little space she had been given to show them. The true trigger came when she realized that even her beauty, the gift that elevated her, had become a limitation. Directors avoided casting her in modern roles because they feared her presence would feel too mythical. Scriptwriters hesitated to give her characters with flaws, believing audiences would reject seeing her as anything other than perfect. Even when she wanted to try something raw, human, and imperfect, she was reminded that such roles would not align with the image she had carried for years. It was as if the world had decided that Liu Yifei did not belong to reality, and therefore could never portray it. Opportunities continued to slip away, not because she lacked talent, but because she did not fit the new mold Cbiz was shaping. The industry wanted actresses who were edgy, sharp, unpredictable. But Liu Yifei had been cast as a dream for too long, and dreams, once defined, are rarely allowed to change. She watched younger actresses rise quickly, taking roles she would have loved, exploring territories she had never been allowed to enter. She watched the conversation around her shift from admiration to uncertainty. She watched her career, once unstoppable, begin to stall in ways she could not control. The public saw only the surface. They saw films that did not perform well. They saw ratings that dropped. They saw roles that felt repetitive. But they did not see the closed doors behind the scenes, the missed chances, the hesitation from producers who feared her image more than her talent. They did not see the scripts she begged to explore, only to be told they were too risky for someone like her. They did not understand that Liu Yifei was not avoiding complexity. Complexity was avoiding her. And so the drama of her career was never allowed collapse. It was a quiet suffocation, a slow realization that the world admired her image more than her work, a truth that weighed on her more heavily than any public criticism. The trigger was subtle, almost invisible, but it was enough to set her on a collision course with the very image that had defined her life for more than a decade. The conflict in Liu Yifei's career did not erupt suddenly. It grew gradually, like a quiet storm forming behind clear skies. On the surface, she remained composed, graceful, unchanging. But beneath that calm exterior, a deeper struggle was unfolding. It was the struggle of an actress who wanted to evolve but was chained to an image the industry refused to let go of. Every time she looked at a script filled with emotional depth or characters with fractures and contradictions, she felt a spark. Yet each time she expressed her interest, that spark was extinguished by the same response. This role is not suitable for you. The phrase became a refrain she heard too often, spoken by different people but driven by the same fear. They feared losing the fairy sister. As the years passed, the contradiction within her life grew sharper. She wanted to be seen as a real actress, but the industry wanted her to remain an icon. She wanted characters with weight, but she was offered characters with beauty. She wanted to explore the ordinary, the flawed, the mortal, but the scripts given to her demanded perfection. Directors insisted her presence was too clean. For darker narratives, producers argued audiences preferred her untouched elegance. Even marketing teams built campaigns around her timeless aura, reinforcing the expectation that she should remain the same no matter how many years passed. This kind of resistance was more destructive than any scandal. It slowly convinced her that every step outside her established image would be punished, that any deviation would confuse audiences, that transformation was not bravery but risk. The conflict deepened when she watched the industry reward reinvention in others while denying her the same opportunity. Younger actresses were praised for shedding their old images, taking on daring roles, breaking themselves open on screen. Meanwhile, Liu Yifei was quietly urged to stay still, to remain beautiful, to remain safe, to remain unchanging. Her schedule, once full of excitement, began to feel mechanical. Film sets no longer challenged her. Characters no longer inspired her. Even the applause began to feel distant, as if it was directed at a version of herself she no longer recognized. She carried the weight of a legend, but legends are heavy, and she was tired of pretending the burden did not exist. Yet she also knew the cost of pushing back. If she rejected too many opportunities, the industry could easily interpret it as arrogance. If she accepted roles she disliked, she would continue sinking deeper into the narrative she desperately wanted to escape. The conflict reached her most personal moments. Late at night, reading scripts alone, she found herself torn between responsibility and desire, between what the world demanded and what she longed to express, between the image that made her famous and the woman she felt she was becoming. Each decision became a negotiation between two forces constantly pulling her in opposite directions. And the more she tried to reconcile them, the more impossible it felt. Even her fans, who adored her, became part of the pressure. They wanted to protect her, but their expectations echoed the restrictions she faced inside the industry. They wanted the fairy sister, not the flawed woman who wanted to explore her craft. They praised her purity, her elegance, her softness. But few understood how much she wanted to push past those qualities, to reveal something raw and real. She lived in a world where deviation from perfection was seen as failure, even though perfection itself was a cage. This was the core of her conflict. She was not fighting against scandal or misfortune. She was fighting against the version of herself the world insisted she remain. A version so adored that it left no room for growth. And the more she tried to find space to breathe, the more she realized that the greatest obstacle in her career was not lack of opportunity, but lack of freedom. The moment everything shifted for Liu Yifei did not come wrapped in triumph. Came disguised as doubt. Before the world celebrated her comeback, she was living through the most uncertain chapter of her career. Offers arrived, but none of them were what she longed for. Some were repetitions of roles she had outgrown. Others were projects that hinged entirely on her name, not her craft. And then there were the roles she wanted, the ones filled with vulnerability and conflict, the ones that could finally prove her range. But those roles passed quietly to others while she remained on the sidelines, watching opportunities slip away like sand through her fingers. The true breaking point arrived shortly before the project that would later revive her image. It was a casting decision that echoed every frustration she had endured. A role she deeply desired was given to another actress, not because she lacked talent, but because the director feared her image would overshadow the character. The feedback was polite but devastating. The audience will not accept you in this kind of role. You are too perfect for the flaws this character requires. In that moment, Liu Yifei felt something inside her fracture. It was the confirmation of a truth she had suspected for years. The image that elevated her was now the very reason she was being denied the chance to grow. Then came the announcement of the new project that many doubted she could carry. The whispers were everywhere. She is outdated. She is not versatile enough. She has not proven herself in years. For the first time, even her supporters wavered. The industry watched with skepticism, expecting another disappointment. And beneath all of it, Liu Yifei stood quietly, absorbing every doubt and every expectation, knowing that this project might be her last chance to rewrite the narrative surrounding her. What the public did not see was how much she invested into that role. The preparation, the late nights, the emotional work she poured into each scene. She did not approach it as a comeback. She approached it as a battle for her identity. Every moment on set was infused with the determination of someone fighting not against rivals or critics, but against the invisible walls built around her for more than a decade. It was a silent rebellion, one performance at a time. And when the first episode aired, something happened that no one predicted. The audience saw her differently. They saw the woman beneath the legend. They saw the depth she had been denied the chance to show. They saw the kind of actress she had always been capable of becoming, but never allowed to reveal. The success that followed was not the climax itself. The real climax was the moment Liu Yifei realized she had broken through the frame the industry had placed around her. Not shattered it completely, but cracked it enough for the world to see her true self. For the first time, the myth made room for the woman. When the success of her new project finally settled, Liu Yifei felt the shift more clearly than anyone else. For the first time in many years, the applause was directed at her performance rather than the myth built around her. The world stopped seeing only the fairy sister. They saw the actress she had always wanted to become. But even in this renewed moment, she understood that a single victory could not erase the weight of a decade spent inside an image she never chose. The industry adjusted slowly. Some directors began offering her roles with emotional depth, testing the version of her they had long overlooked. Others remained trapped in the past, unsure whether her transformation was temporary. Liu Yifei no longer carried these doubts as burdens. She chose her projects, deliberately, refusing to return to the roles that once boxed her in. Each decision became a quiet assertion of her identity. Yet freedom in Cbiz is never complete. The fairy sister label still lingers, a reminder of how tightly beauty can hold a person in place. Some viewers still prefer the ethereal figure she once embodied, unaware of how much it cost her. But she has stopped living for their expectations. The myth may follow her, but it no longer leads her. What matters now is the woman she has allowed herself to become. Not the untouchable icon, but someone grounded, determined, and unafraid to grow. Liu Yifei survived the weight of perfection, stepped outside the frame built for her, and reclaimed her narrative one careful step at a time. Her story is no longer about escaping a cage, but about quietly, deliberately reshaping it into a space she can finally call her own.